1,000 spaces on this Zoom room, which we have paid for, but evidently we only have 100 Zoom spaces here. If you're being contacted by anybody who wants to join us, please tell them that it's currently live streaming at welearntogether.org/Sinai. Again, welearntogether.org/Sinai. Okay, everybody, welcome to the Marching to Sinai International Speaker Series. It's a great privilege to welcome you. My name is Ariel Shoshan. I'm the Rabbi of Ahavas Torah in Scottsdale, Arizona, and I have the privilege of working with many talented people, many wonderful organizations to put this program together. Of course, it's a very special event for us, just in order to be able to host Rabbi Tats and hear his words. He is, of course, one of the most prominent speakers in the Torah world, and we're excited by his presence, and we'll get to that in a few moments. I want to begin by thanking our partners, especially welearntogether.org. I don't know if that's a brand new program or it's relatively new, but Rabbi Naftali Hamfling in California has gone above and beyond to help us with this streaming event, and they have ongoing great events that are going on their website, and we encourage you to look there. Thanks to JP Katz in J Pulse in Boston. Rabbi Katz is one of the creative and excited members of the Kiruv community around the world. And he's been a great innovator in technology for a long time and bringing Torah to masses in far off places. Our own staff, particularly Mrs. Hallie Farber, who's done so much to create the graphic work that you have seen, that was the source by which you saw probably this. And of course, our 57 partners across the country and across the world. This was conceived as an event several weeks ago when we had successful events before Pesach, and we brought many people together. All the organizations really do incredible things in their local places, and they want you to be in touch with Torah in a meaningful way. So we've partnered together with so many and see this as their event. It's your rabbi who brought you here to listen to Rabbi Tats, and we're just an intermediary through the Zoom and through the live streaming. In particular, we want to thank our own organization, Ahavas Torah, here in Scottsdale, together with Ora Torah and Yeshiva High School in Phoenix, Arizona. In California, I hope I won't miss anybody's names. We have Beth Jacob in San Diego, and the Westwood Kehila and Link Kolel in California, as well as Am Echad in San Jose. Colorado, Esha Torah, and the Jewish Experience, in Florida, Boca Raton, the Boca Torah Center and Eitz Chaim in Jacksonville. Just today, we were joined by Orlando Torah Center, as well as the Young Israel in Kendall. Georgia, welcome to Atlanta and Dunwoody. In Illinois, welcome to 2 organizations in Chicago. In Baltimore and Owings Mills, Maryland. In Boston, as mentioned already before. In Detroit Partners, and in Minnesota, the Actions Together of Aish and the 2 shuls, Base and KI. In Missouri, the St. Louis Kollel and the Avos Torah Center in Nevada. Welcome to several organizations in New Jersey, from Linden to South Jersey. Welcome to BJX and Shar in New York, and to the Agudas Yisrael of Ohio and the Cincinnati Kollel in Ohio. Portland, Oregon, and the Kollel. Several in Pennsylvania, from the Pittsburgh Kollel to the First Seder Beis Medrash in Philadelphia, as well as the Ben Salem Kollel. The Kollel in Rhode Island, in Providence, the Memphis Kollel in Tennessee, Data of Plano, Meyerland Minion, now J Hype also in Houston, Oratora in Dallas, and Rodfei Shalom in San Antonio. We're honored by the presence of 3 organizations in Seattle, Ashreichem and BCMH, and the Kollel in Wisconsin, Rabbi Twersky's Shul, Beth Yehuda, as well as the Kollel, and now in Panama, in Central America, one of the largest Torah communities in this half of the world, in Shevet Achim in Panama, as well as the Village Shul in Toronto, Beth Israel in Edmonton, and in Israel, we are privileged by Ramat Beit Shemesh, Beis Tefillah, as well as Or Sameach and Me'orot Seminary. Thank you to the JLE in London as well, and Rabbi Tats for providing this opportunity. So we're not going to do that every week. We're not going to tell you who all the partners are, but it just gives you the sense of how special the moment is and how Klal Yisrael is coming together. I once heard from the Spinker Rebbe Shlita, Rabbi Avram Abish Horowitz of Williamsburg, that his father, Zichrono Livracha, Reb Hershela, said that in the earlier times, after the Churban, we saw the light that was still coming from the Shkia, from the sunset of the previous Batei Mikdashim. The Beis HaMikdash was destroyed and there was still light. And now we know that we are in a time of great return to Yiddishkeit over the last half century, and more, and even this little moment, who am I to say, but this little moment of bringing Jews together with barriers down. What is the light that's bringing so many people together to learn across the world and across the country, and particularly that we have access to such special Talmidei Chachamim, to such special Jews who can bring us a message that our own rabbi perhaps cannot. And the Rebbe told me that the light is the light of the third Beis HaMikdash. Because as we know, after sunset and after the sun goes down, you still have light. But before the sun rises, you have a new light. And so we feel very, very privileged to be together, sharing in that new light. And who better than Rabbi Tats to bring us together? We've had the privilege, I'm sure many organizations, to learn from Rabbi Tats, to understand, not only because of his medical background and his immense background of connection to Rabbi Moshe Shapiro and other great Talmidei Chachamim and Gedolim of Yerushalayim, but because of his own particular personal intellect and his own way of the subtleties of understanding things. So it's really a privilege to have had the opportunity to put this together, to bring you Rabbi Dr. Akiva Tatz, senior lecturer in the JLE in London. Rabbi Tatz will stay with us after. Hopefully the technology will work to accept some questions by chat. But please turn your attention, and with great thanks, I welcome Rabbi Dr. Akiva Tatz from London.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Shoshan. It's a pleasure to work with you and to speak to what sounds like the whole American Jewish community. I don't think there's anyone you left out there at that long list. So thanks for the opportunity. Pleasure to speak to people. It's always a pleasure to teach Americans how to speak English correctly. I cannot see your chats at the moment, so give me a chance to build a little picture, broad strokes, what I'd like to cover in this discussion, and then we'll open the chat opportunity. I'll be very happy to take some questions, and I'm very happy to answer if I can. But I'd like to suggest to you something provocative, something a little bit deeper than we're used to thinking about, something that will demand a little bit of concentration on a different wavelength. And that is the question of isolation and silence. Let me try to explain what I mean and work through this very difficult subject. One of the things you're forced into in isolation may be silence. Yes, it's true that many of us are locked up with families who make a lot of noise. Yes, I know that. Some of us find more opportunities for silence in other circumstances. But one of the things that you can associate with your isolation is silence. There are many people who are in fact totally isolated. People this year made a Seder by themselves in complete isolation. And that is an opportunity to develop and cultivate the faculty of silence. And I'd like to suggest to you that this is a basic precursor to Torah. Without the faculty of meditative silence, you cannot begin to be human. Let me try to explain this. And obviously, we all realize we're struggling here to talk about a subject in words, which is paradoxical. We're talking about silence. We'll need words to discuss it and describe it. Obviously, we'll run into a problem. Like all deeper subjects that have their roots in the Kabbalistic world, we are always looking for an understanding beyond the words. The words are only there just enough for the person to latch on, to click onto the idea beyond the words. So let's see if we can use clumsy words well enough to get ourselves into that space. Okay, are we together? Give me a thumbs up, some kind of sign, so I know you're listening to me. Good, okay, excellent, excellent. By the way, there's a depth in silence. Here's a beautiful incident that I hope you'll appreciate. I heard from Ramosha Shapira that many years ago, during the life of the Chazon Ish, there was a young, talented rabbinic scholar. He didn't say it was himself. Well, I think from the context of the story, I think it was a personal story. But that he didn't reveal that. But he said he was talking to the Chazon Ish, as you know, the great sage of that generation, died in 1954, genius, leader of the Jewish people at that time. And the Chazon Ish met this young, very, very promising and talented rabbinic scholar. And he said to him, the Gemara says, Milim b'shtaim, mashtuki betray. That's an expression in the Gemara, that a word is worth one, let's call it a pound, a dollar, let's call it a dollar. A word is worth $1, and silence is worth 2. That's a well-known, that's what the Gemara says. So Chazon Ish said to this young rabbinic scholar, he said to him, so which is worth more? Let's get that question clear. The Gemara says a word is worth 1, silence is worth 2. So he said to this young, talented Talmid Chacham, he said to him, so which is worth 2? So the young fellow thought, well, you're obviously not looking for the obvious answer, right? I'd be a fool to give the obvious answer. So he said, words are worth more. Now, again, let's get this clear. The Gemara says a word is worth 1, a silence is worth 2. He said, words are worth more. A word is worth more. How do you explain that? He said, because for every word you get $1, but you can only be silent once. Again, for every word you earn $1, and for your silence you earn 2, but you can only be silent once. The Chazon Ish said to him, that's exactly wrong, and that's what I wanted you to understand. That's the trap I did not want you to fall into. The Gemara means what it says. When the Gemara says a word is worth 1 and silence is worth 2, obvious silence is worth more. And here's what the Gemara means. The Gemara means for every word you get $1, and for every word you did not say, you get 2. We're not talking about being silent once. Every wise word that is withheld is worth 2. We're not talking about one long silence, a meaningless silence. We're talking about careful cultivation of the words that you use. All right, that's an introduction. Let's see if we can get a little bit beneath the surface here. There are 2 faculties in the mind. There are 2 parts to the mind. Again, this is a little difficult to express, obviously. If you'd like a written summary in my book, Living Inspired, I tried my best to summarize the sources for this, but I'll try to give you an overview and a little bit of opportunity to scratch beneath the surface. There are 2 faculties of mind. This is taught in all the Kabbalistic works. Rabbi has a classic book on this, Pirkei Das. But Rav Dessler is the one who spoke it out most clearly to our generation. And Rav Dessler said that there are 2 faculties of mind. There's one that's called the Mabat HaChitzoni, the outer eye, I-E-Y-E, Mabat Chitzoni, the outer eye. And then there's the inner eye, the Mabat HaPnimi, the inner eye. Let's call it the outer vision and the inner vision. These are the 2 faculties of mind. What are they? The outer one is very easy to define. The outer eye is all the senses and the intellectual faculty that works with those senses. In other words, the outer eye transduces the world. It is my senses, taste, touch, smell, hearing, all the faculties with which I engage the world. And then my ability to compute and calculate and work with those things, break them down, reconstruct, come to conclusions. That's called the outer eye. That is not the entire mind. That is the smallest and least significant part of the mind. And what I'd like to try to suggest to you is that in the Western world, it's all we know. The inner mind, the meditational inner mind, the mind of real knowledge is something that we are hopelessly out of touch with. The Eastern world is more familiar with that mind. It's a mind that's cultivated by paradox and by silence. So let's see that again. There's an outer eye that constitutes the tools of interaction with the world and the ability to calculate. But if you think about it for a moment, you'll realize, which is quite embarrassing and quite humiliating, that a machine does that too. Machines can also absorb data from the world and calculate and come to conclusions. That's exactly what your computer does. But there's one thing your computer cannot do. That's the mabat apnimi. That's the inner eye. The inner eye, by definition, is all the knowledge you have. That has nothing to do with the senses and nothing to do with calculation. That's your consciousness. That's your grasp of a thing as it is. And that, you will realize, has no words. The outer eye is a wisdom that can be perfectly apprehended in words and perfectly expressed in words. In fact, if you cannot put it into words, you didn't understand it. If you would like to see if you understand a technical subject accurately, express it. If you can express it clearly and concisely, and someone else will understand perfectly what you mean, you grasp it. If you cannot put it into words, you did not understand it. But then there's another understanding. That's the inner understanding. That's the consciousness, the conscious awareness that a thing is. No computer can do that. No machine can do that. Obviously, this is the faculty that you cannot put into words. But think about it for a moment, you'll realize that what you know with your inner eye is far more important and far more real than what you know with your outer eye. For example, what do you know with your inner eye? You know that you exist. Let's think about this for a moment. How do you know that you exist? This inner faculty, by the way, we call das. Das, inner knowledge, da'at, right? Inner knowledge, real knowledge, knowledge of connection, bonding to things that you know in an intimate and intrinsic way. You know, this da'at, this faculty of das, the outer eye is not called das. The outer eye is called, the technical word is bina, and there are many other words for it, but the inner faculty is the faculty of das. Let me try to illustrate this in this way. You know that the word for knowledge has two connotations. One is what you know with your mind, and the second connotation is marital togetherness. Marriage, marital intimacy is called das. In fact, it's very interesting that the first time the Torah uses this word, it's not dealing with intellectual knowledge, it's dealing with male-female togetherness. When the Torah says, "Va'adam yadas chava ishtoi," that Adam and Eve, there was a knowledge of each other. It's talking about a bonding of intimacy. Let's think about that for a moment. First of all, it's fascinating to note that the Torah's first use of the word is marital togetherness, not intellectual knowledge. That's the primary meaning. The secondary meaning is what you know with your mind. What's the connection between man and woman being together, bonding into an original oneness, and what you know with your mind? Because what you know with your das is part of you. When husband and wife are united, that the faculty, the aspect, the mitzvah of marriage is the reconstitution of an original oneness. Husband and wife were one in the spiritual world. They're brought down separate to bond again in oneness. So two things becoming one is called das. That's an intimate meshing into one. What you know with your das is stuff that you know, material that you know that becomes your mind itself. As the Rambam puts it about Hashem's knowledge, where the knower and the known are one. What does this mean? Let me give you a practical expression. When you know something with the outer eye, what happens if it turns out to be false? It's deleted, right? You have a certain concept in your mind, it turns out to be false. The knowledge is deleted because you and that knowledge are separate things. You can live with the knowledge, you can live without it. You live before you get the concept, and you have the concept, and then you can forget it. You can forget it, you can reject it. But when you know things with the inner mind, when you know things with the inner eye, they are part of you. The mind and what is known are one. Let me illustrate that for you. You know that you are intrinsically. Your inner eye knows that you are. Nothing to do with external proofs or demonstrations or things that your senses can demonstrate or logical intellectual conclusions. I'm sure you know there's no formal philosophical proof of the fact that you exist. Descartes, who said, "I think, therefore I am," did not mean I intellectualize, right? The fact that the brain intellectualizes and does certain chemical processes is no more proof that you exist, that your muscles work or your stomach operates. Descartes didn't mean that. He meant, I know that I am, and therefore I am. That's the only thing you can know, unmediated, unedited, and directly. Let's ask for a moment, what would happen if your knowledge of your existence disappeared? You would certainly disintegrate as a human being, right? You and the knowledge are one. Your being and your knowledge of existence are one, and it's direct. You do not know that you exist because somebody told you, or because you can pinch yourself or taste, or you know because you know it yourself. You know, there's a classic story about a professor who taught his students that there's no intellectual proof that you exist. You cannot prove you exist. A week later, a student came in and said, Professor, I've been distressed all week. You have to tell me, do I exist? The professor said to him, who would like to know? Who wishes to know? You know you exist directly. That's called das. And think about it for a moment, you'll realize that all the important things you know with das. How do you know that you're human? How do you know that you're a human and not an animal? There's no formal proof of that. If you speak to an atheistic evolutionist, they will assert that you and an animal are exactly the same, slight differences in detail. And you know that's deeply wrong. Can you prove it? No. How do you know you have free will? How do you know you make a moral choice? Can you demonstrate that? Absolutely not. The materialist scientist will tell you that you're fooled. You're only thinking you make a free choice, but you know you have it. You know it directly. You know it immediately. You grasp it. I think that can be proved. How do you know that you live in the present? That undefinable, amazing slipping away of the past into the future, which has an infinitesimal dimension. Can't express that or put that into words, but you live it and you know it. How do you know you're Jewish, by the way? Again, this is a painful subject in our generation. In the Kiruv world, we struggle with this all the time. How do you know that you're Jewish? Is it because somebody told you? You go and check there's a mezuzah on your door? Isn't it something deeper than that? Let me ask you another question. How do you know you're a male or a female? Yes, I know. Many don't. I know this is a generation that's challenged in this area. But how do you know you're male? Because you refer to your body? Something much deeper than that. Much, much deeper than that. There are things you know with das. By the way, this is the only faculty you can use to know God. If you want to start moving in the development, in the direction of knowing Hashem, cannot use the external mind. The senses, the intellectual faculty, proofs will never get you there. Proofs are important. Intellectual process is important. It can soften you up, can sensitize you, can bring you to the brink. It can do many things for you, but will never give you a knowledge. A marital knowledge is not intellectual. A marital knowledge is two people fusing into one. It's experiential. And therefore, there are two, let me summarize this. There are two faculties of the mind. There's the outer eye, the mabat hachitzoni, that is the Western intellectual tradition, analytical tradition, logic, measures, scientific work, all that stuff, very important, but not essentially human. And then there's the human knowledge, which is called the das. No animal has that, or an animal has it at a very low level, a very primitive level. But a human being has that at a very sophisticated level, and it cannot be communicated. Things that you grasp with the das cannot be put into words. You can only develop that through silence, only in the silence of meditation, where you actually know your own mind beyond words, is the only way of getting into this essentially human and ultimately Jewish and faith-charged space. That is the faculty of das. Anything you know with the das, you cannot put into words. If you can put it into words, it's not the thing itself. You know, let's explore this. Let's explore this. By the way, this is a very difficult subject in the West. We live in such a volume of noise. One of the great writers of the last century, C.S. Lewis, he said, we live in a cataract of nonsense. A cataract of nonsense. And he said it back then. Can you imagine now with the media, and most people are terrified to find themselves alone with their own inner knowledge. People on their own, they switch on the media quickly. They've got to have people talking to them so that there's a noise buzzing in their ears. Somebody's taking a drive someplace. The radio has to be on so you can hear somebody talking. And who are you listening to? Some idiot who knows nothing about the subject, taking calls from people who know even less. What a waste of time is that? What a waste. But you've got to have somebody telling you something. What about a quiet moment of knowing, simply knowing and enjoying what it is that you are? Rabbi had a student once who was having some emotional problems. He sent him on a walk. He told him, leave the yeshiva garden and walk in the fields. The young man went for a walk, and a few hours later he came back. Rabbi said, what did you discover out there? He said, I was very afraid out there in the fields. Rabbi said, yes, it's because of whom you met. He said, no, Rabbi, I didn't meet anybody. He said, no, you met somebody important for the first time. You know, when you're silent, you can meet yourself. And you can develop the faculty of knowing who you are. Is it the more noise you have, the less chance. You know, these aspects of inner knowledge you cannot communicate. We live in a world, people live together for 50 years and then only begin to realize they never understood from the beginning what the other one was saying. Generally men. Women usually have a talent for understanding what's meant despite what's being said. Husbands only get the get the feel of this after many years. They realize their wife understood them despite what they're not because they didn't say it, despite what they said. Women have a certain sense of that, usually. By the way, men never understand what women mean at all. They don't understand the words or the inner meaning. That's a man's problem, but be that as it may. But when two people understand each other, the really meaningful things cannot be put into words. There's a very deep problem of communication. The things that are real, even a simple thing like an experience, just the experience of a sunset, the experience of something very moving and meaningful, you can't put that into words. How do you communicate to somebody else? There's only one way. When you know somebody so deeply and so well that you don't need any words, then you have a chance. When a gesture or half a word is enough, someone who knows what you mean already, then you can communicate. But if you need words, you have no chance. Here's a rule. The more words you need, the less chance you have of communicating the idea. The more you need to explain, the less chance you have of the other person understanding you. That's the problem with words. Let's go a little bit deeper, try to understand this at a more intrinsic level. Maybe I'm speaking to the converted. Maybe you're all people who live in, I don't know where you live, Arizona, California. You're probably very deep and intuitive. You probably don't need this message at all. But if you ever meet anyone who does, you'll be able to tell them. Let's explore this. Let me give you a few examples. Perhaps that's the best way to say it, to explain it, to put it across. Words are finite packages, finite, broken fragments of an original oneness. And therefore, meaning cannot be put into words. No matter how articulate, how eloquent the words are, they can never say the thing itself. They can talk about the thing. Let me give you a few examples. You know, the Mishnah says that Kabbalah cannot be communicated. I'll give you a few examples. Kabbalah is the inner meaning of Torah, not the technical meaning of Torah. The technical side of Torah can be expressed very well. Halachic material, technical halachic material, Talmudic analysis, of course it can be expressed in words. Why not? Anything in that realm, which is engineering, mathematical, logical, philosophically logical, can be put into words perfectly. And the exercise of Talmudic learning is to be able to do that. But the inner things, the things that are the deeper inner meaning, the Kabbalistic meaning, which is the intrinsic essential meaning, the heart and soul of Torah, cannot be put into words. I'll give you two examples. What is the word that we use in Torah for Kabbalistic wisdom? It's called Sod. Sod means the secret wisdom. Why is it called secret? People think secret because no one told me. It's a secret, no one told me. But one day I'll be walking through the streets of the old city of Jerusalem, and a wizened hand will reach out from an alley, and a man with a long white beard, a very old man, he'll pull me into the alley, and he'll tell me all the secrets of Kabbalah, and then I'll know. That, my friends, is very childish. Kabbalah is called Sod not because no one told you, but because nobody could. No one can ever tell you. No one will ever tell you. It's a wisdom that lives beyond words. It's not called a secret because no one happened to tell you. That's just coincidental. Torah, we never name things in Torah accidentally. It's called a secret because no one happened to tell you. And for the person who knows, it's not a secret. It's a secret for everyone. Kabbalah is the wisdom that cannot be put into words. The Mishnah puts it like this. The Mishnah says when the master teaches the disciple, he tells him only general categories. He does not tell him the material itself. Why? Is this some sort of a game? The master must make the student guess? No. The reason the Rabbi does not teach the Talmud, the reason the master does not teach the disciple is because he cannot. There are no words for this thing. How do you teach the student? You talk about it long enough until he gets it. When he gets it, he falls in. And the moment he gets it, he thinks to himself, why did you need so many words in the first place? Imagine, just to give you a very crude analogy, imagine trying to describe to someone in words how to balance on a bicycle. Could you do that? You can't put that into words. It's experience. But you can get him close enough with your words till he eventually gets it by accident. And then it's simple. Then he thinks, why did it take you so many words to explain? Kabbalistic wisdom is taught by getting the student close enough so that he falls in. Once he falls in, it becomes obvious. And he doesn't need the words anymore. It's not some sort of a game. Let me give you another example. Let me give you another example. The Maharal says that Moshe Rabbeinu could not speak normally. He had a speech defect. He couldn't speak. That is very strange. That is very strange. Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, was a spiritual creation. The Ran and other commentators say he was a spiritual creation made for purpose, a transcendental, impossible human being, made to lead the Jewish people out of Egypt and be the channel through which Torah would flow. Is it not strange that the person who's meant to be a channel, the spokesman of the Jewish people, cannot speak? Isn't that weird? Hashem, what are you thinking? You create a human being to be your people's spokesman. He's the one who must speak your words to the Jewish people and speak the Jewish people's words to you. His function is to speak spirituality. And you create a human being who's completely and utterly transcendent. And the one thing he cannot do is speak. So much so that he needs a spokesman. He needs his brother to speak for him. Hashem, what are you thinking? I'm sure you see the problem. This is a classic and well-known problem. And there are many famous answers to this question. The Ran has his own famous answer to this. It's a wonderful subject. But let me tell you what the Maharal says. And if this doesn't move you, there's no hope for you. Let me tell you what the Maharal says. The Maharal says that the reason that Moshe Rabbeinu could not speak well was because it was his perfection. His perfection was the inability to speak. Meaning, he was living in a world where things achieve their oneness. He was living in a world, operating in a world where all things are interconnected in their oneness, where all things are aspects of godliness. You can't put that into words. When you're living in a world of finite particulate details, you can say the words. Each word means a piece of reality. You grasp a piece of reality, you put it into a word. But when you're living in a world where things are of infinite value, where all things plug in, lock in to their oneness, manifest the infinity, there are no words for that. Any word would be a breaking down, a cheapening, a trivialization, a fracturing into detail. The reason Moshe Rabbeinu could not speak is not because he had a defect, but because he had a perfection. Are we together on this? Am I getting anywhere? Am I communicating some of this? Give me a little sign if you're with me, please. Moshe Rabbeinu was a creation who could not bring down into the finite world things of infinite value. That's why he could not speak normally. He was on the level of the message itself. You know, the Rabbeinu Avram ben Rambam says something out of this world. Out of this world. He himself says he heard this from his father, the Rambam, and it is something exquisitely beautiful. In a nutshell, without laboring the details, I'll tell you what he says. Moshe Rabbeinu, Hashem said to him, go and tell Pharaoh the following message. So Moshe said to Hashem, but Hashem, I cannot speak. Hashem said, don't worry, I'll send your brother Aaron. Your brother Aaron will speak for you. But if you look in the next parsha, that's in Shmois. If you look in the next parsha, the conversation continues. Moshe turns to Hashem and he says, but Hashem, I cannot speak. And Hashem says, no, you didn't hear me. I'll send your brother Aaron. Aaron achicha yeh nevi'echo. Aaron, your brother, will be your prophet. Listen to the conversation. You see, you don't realize this because it's spread over 2 parshas in the Torah. But the conversation goes like this. Moshe, go and tell the following message to Pharaoh and the Jewish people. Moshe says, Hashem, I cannot speak. Hashem says, never mind, Aaron, your brother, will speak for you. Moshe says, but Hashem, I cannot speak. Well, you have a problem with your hearing? No. Aaron, your brother, will be your prophet. He'll speak for you. And then Moshe gets it. What didn't he get the first time? Listen to the Rambam's explanation. The Rambam says, when Hashem said to Moshe, deliver a message, Moshe said, Hashem, I cannot speak. How will I do that? Hashem said, Aaron, your brother, will speak for you. Moshe said, Hashem, that won't work. There's a law in Torah that a prophet must speak his own prophecy. There's a law in the laws of prophecy, the Rambam codifies this law, that a prophet, on pain of death, must speak his own prophecy. If he tries to refuse his prophecy, refuse to speak it, he pays with his life for that. How do we know that? From Jonah, from Yena. Jonah tried to refuse to say his prophecy, and Hashem would not tolerate that. Every time a man gets a prophecy, or a woman, every time a person gets a prophecy, they get a message what to say, and they get the message that they're the one who has to say it. And every other prophet in the generation gets the same message, and they get it with his name on. They're tuned to the same wavelength. They get the message that that person has to say it, and they're forbidden to say it. They could, in fact, testify later if he fails to say it, because they got the same message. So there's a life and death rule in the rules of prophecy, that when a prophet gets a message, he must say it himself. He's forbidden to say it to anyone else to say for him. And no one else may say his message. So Moshe says, Hashem, you're telling me to go and send a message, give a message to Paro. I cannot speak. You tell me Aaron, my brother, will speak for you. You know that's forbidden. You wrote the rules. And Hashem turned to him and said, you misunderstood very badly. I haven't forgotten the rules. I know that a prophet may not say his message to someone else. I don't mean that you'll be a prophet saying it over to a spokesman. Moshe, you'll be the prophecy. And Aaron, your brother, will be your prophet. He will receive a prophecy called you. You're not going to be a prophet receiving a message. You're going to be the message. You will be on the level of the message itself. Moshe, you don't understand. You're not a person receiving. You're not an instrument resonating. with a beautiful tone when the music is played on you, the music itself. And Aaron will fulfill the normal rules of prophecy. He'll be a Navi, a prophet, receiving a prophecy, namely you. You are at the level of, and therefore when you're operating at that level, okay, you cannot put things into words. Any words you say, no matter what words you say, will be a ridiculous trivialization and a bringing down into the finite. After the Torah was given, Moshe spoke normally. After the Torah was given, Moshe spoke normally. Why? What was the giving of the Torah? The packaging of an infinite wisdom into finite words. What happened at Sinai? God appeared on the mountain. Hashem appeared on the mountain. What does that mean? It means the infinite manifested in the finite. That is miraculous and impossible, but it happened. And that's called Torah. Torah is an endless, infinite wisdom packed into a finite number of words. The written Torah has just so many words in 5 books, and it's an endless wisdom. After that miracle was perpetrated in the world, Moshe could speak normally. The miracle became possible in the world. But until that time, he could not speak. That's another example of the inability to bring down into words. Let me give you another one. How are we doing? Are we together still? Are these clumsy words making some progress? Yeah? Okay. Let me give you another example. Painful one. A painful one. When you understand something deep, the worst thing you can do is speak it out. You speak it out, you lose it. When you understand something deep and meaningful, it makes contact with your personality, and it registers deeply with you and touches you and extends into your consciousness. The worst mistake you can make is to spit it out, to package it and to clothe it in a finite package of words, bring it down into the finite world. One of the great teachers of Musa, of Simcha Zissel Ziv, one of the great masters of Musa from the early generation of Musa, he once waited 25 years before sharing an incredible Torah idea that he had with his son. He writes to him after 20, he said, I've waited 25 years to express this idea. When I originally heard it in Torah, I was so deeply moved by it, I knew that if I would speak it, I'd lose it. Again, the man waited 25 years before sharing something. He was concerned that if he brought it out into a finite package of words, it wouldn't. Again, when you learn something deep, and most of us, and I can tell you as a teacher, somebody who works in Kiruv in teaching, the urge is, wow, I've got to share that with somebody. I got to tell that the most beautiful experience and the most meaningful experience. I got to share that with somebody. Not so fast. Not so fast. Wait till it becomes part of you. Again, you are worth sharing it with. As soon as you absorb it and you spit it out, it's simply that there needs to be a moment of absorption, time of meditation where it becomes part of you, seeps into the faculty of das, where it's known and grasped by you in a way that could never be put into words. Let me give you another example. Anyone in this group, does anyone in this group have a family member who lived through the Holocaust? Anybody? Anyone you're close with? Do you know it's a very common finding that if you speak to people like that, many of them never spoke about it ever. They never spoke about what they went through ever. And people say, we tried, we spoke to my grandmother, never spoke about it ever. Young people misunderstand that very badly. Young people think those people didn't speak about it because it was too painful. That's not the reason. They didn't speak about it because they could not. How do you take such enormous, unbelievable, inhuman cruelty? Unbelievable. How do you start putting that into words without trivializing? How do you say that? You're talking to your grandchild. You're talking about a nation. Again, it would take me hours to. You're talking about a nation that decides to murder its own civilians. Not, first of all, killing civilians is a war crime of the enemy. Here you're going to take your own citizens and shoot them to death on the edge of a pit. The German officer shooting those people was their neighbor. The lady that he's shooting taught his children at school. The guy next to her is his family doctor. You're talking about they're civilians who are your citizens. You're going to murder them and bury them alive. I mean, how do you, repeated millions of times, how do you, the people, they didn't speak about it, not because it was too painful to reopen those wounds, but because you can't. And by the way, the converse is true as well. When a person is suffering from a pain that is too deep to bear, talking is good therapy. When they start speaking and it pours out in words, it often takes on a manageable dimension. It's no longer larger than me. It can be put into, it's a lot of words. And indeed, it may take hours of therapy to get it out. But once you bring the conceptualized dimension into certain amount of words, it can be very helpful. Let me give you one more example. Again, you see it takes a lot of words to talk about silence. Let me give you one more example. The Gemara says that when the child is born, Gemara in Daf Lamed in Nida says, when a child is in the womb, he's taught the whole Torah. The child in the womb is taught the whole Torah. I'm sure you're familiar with this idea. As an angel, teaches him the whole Torah. He has all of cosmic wisdom, sees from one end of the world to the other. He knows all there is to know about the world and about his future, has ultimate cosmic wisdom. At the point of birth, Ba Malach, an angel comes, V'satra el piv, strikes him a blow on the mouth. The shocking blow makes the child forget everything that he knew, and is born as a simple child who knows nothing. Now, there are obviously a lot of questions to ask on this. Why would God teach a child the whole Torah only to make him forget when he's going to need it? There are many, many questions on this. But here's one fundamental question that the Maharal of Prague asks. Why a blow on the mouth? If you want to make somebody forget something, you hit them on the head, right? I can tell you, speaking as a doctor, that is much more effective. If you want to make somebody forget something, a sharp blow on the head is going to make them forget. You don't hit them on the mouth. Again, you hear the question? This is a fascinating question. This is the Maharal's question. Why does the Gemara say that when God wants to make the child forget his wisdom, he strikes him a sharp blow on the mouth? What does that mean? Says the Maharal, here's the secret. The blow on the mouth is the gift of speech. When you're given speech, you lose knowledge. As long as you meditate inwardly and deeply, you can know a thing. As soon as you can speak it out, it becomes only the words. Now it takes on that dimension that there's a tremendous danger that you will lose it. So I hope that you are with me and understanding what I'm saying. Let me leave you, before we take a few questions, with one final illustration, which again is beautiful beyond words. Let me give you this illustration. I'll tell you the way I heard it, very meaningful to me, and I hope you'll enjoy it in the same way. Rav Moshe Shapiro, who was my teacher, put it this way. He said, when I was 11 years old in Tel Aviv, he was raised in Tel Aviv. He said on Shabbos afternoon, Shabbat afternoon, he used to go to a little shul in Tel Aviv. It was a Hasidic shtibel, little place. The people used to go, they were working people, but on Shabbos, he said, they looked like angels, old Hasidim from a previous generation. And one Shabbos afternoon, they used to exchange ideas on the parasha. One Shabbos afternoon, here is what one of them said. This is beyond breathtaking. And when I heard him say this, to realize that an 11-year-old child understood this is something beyond conception. But nevertheless, this is what he said. There was an old Chassid over there, and the Parsha happened to be Parsha Shmini. We just read it not long ago. In Parsha Shmini, you know that the Haftarah has a strange incident. Let me tell you the incident, and then I'll tell you what this elderly Chassid explained about that incident. And this should be a life message that is priceless. Here's the incident. King David was celebrating bringing the ark, the holy ark of the covenant, up to Jerusalem. And as he brought it through those streets on the way to Jerusalem, King David was dancing in ecstasy in front of the ark. David was dancing with all his strength in front of the ark in the street. And as he was dancing with his joy, every few steps they would stop and make a celebration. The king of Israel, King David, was dancing ecstatically in the street at his joy in bringing the ark towards Jerusalem. The Michal bat Shaul, his wife Michal, the daughter of Saul, Nishkafa Barach, she was watching him from the window, Vativez Leibeliba, and she despised him in her heart. She despised him in her heart for dancing in that fashion in the street. When David got home, she said to him, aren't you ashamed that you exposed yourself in that way in the street, dancing in the eyes of the maidservants of your people, expressing yourself in that with that abandon in the street? And she said a very sharp criticism. You exposed yourself, you danced, you showed your joy and your ecstasy with no reserve of dignity, ke'echad harekim, like one of the empty fellows. Can you imagine speaking to King David that way? Ke'echad harekim, like an empty fellow. And David said to her, Unakalesi oid mizos, I would belittle myself even more in Hashem's honor. Even more than that, in the eyes of the same maidservants that you complain, Unakalesi oid mizos, I would belittle myself and make myself even lighter than that for Hashem's glory. And the Parsha ends by saying, and Michal never had a child until the day she died. Samaforshi means, it means she had a child on the day she died. She died in childbirth. What is this conversation? Listen to what this man said. And if this doesn't change your life, I give up. Here's what he said. What was she complaining about? You think the Tanakh is telling us a little husband-wife squabble? She was concerned because he was undignified, and he said it's right to be undignified for Hashem. She complained because you could see his ankles, you could see his knees. What exactly was the complaint? What was her complaint? What was his defense? Gentlemen and ladies, the Torah is always talking essence. The Torah is always talking essence. And here's what the discussion was. When David danced in those Jerusalem streets, it wasn't his ankles that you could see, it was his soul. And she complained, you may never expose your entire soul. If you can reveal your soul in the world, you've killed it. If you've packaged it, you expressed it fully. Let me try to explain this. You go out with a friend, you meet a person for the first time, you go out to the kosher shopping mall and you sit at the kosher cappuccino stand, and the fellow leans over and tells you all about his life in 20 minutes. If he can tell you all about his life in 20 minutes, that's all he is, 20 minutes of talk. That's where the relationship ends. There's nothing more to discover. There's no content beyond that. To be a human being worthy of knowing you, for everything I discover about you, I must begin to realize that there's so much more that I never discovered, and that it's developing all the time. There must always be a wellspring of depth that goes far beyond what can be expressed. If you can express all that you are, that's all you are. The human being begins in an inexpressible dimension. And for every word you can say, there must be a wealth of depth, a wellspring of depth that could never be said. Her claim was not that you could see his ankles. She said you kept nothing behind. You revealed yourself fully in the world. You demonstrated your neshama fully. You kept nothing. You have committed the unforgivable sin of detaching yourself from the spiritual world. You broke your connection to an infinite well. You fully your dancing was so ecstatic. You know, every movement expresses the soul. Words very articulately, but gestures and expressions as well. The Gemara says you can see if a person's wise by the way he walks. Dance, where the whole body is illuminated with inner expression, expresses in the outer world what the inner meaning is. And you dance so expressively that we saw you entirely. We saw to the bottom of your soul. That's unforgivable. You may never empty the well. For everything you express in the world, there must be endless depth behind it. And by the way, it needs to develop all the time. You get to know someone, appreciate them, appreciate more of their depth, and then you begin to realize there's so much more that you never knew. And the next time you speak to them, you realize more is being developed. But you need to cultivate that in yourself. A lifetime of development means that you're building a depth that is completely inexpressible, that you'll never be able to express. And the greater you become in Torah, the more you learn, the less you'll be able to express, the less of a proportion and a percentage you'll be able to express. And you'll have to learn to live with yourself and enjoy the depth and be confident, comfortable, expressing only the tip, only small amounts to the person who can hear it. That's all. And when she accused David of doing that, he said to her, you think I forgot that rule? Do you know how much is hidden that you never saw? You think I exposed my soul completely in those streets? You misjudged me very seriously. It's also possible that she had a child at the moment of death because she emptied herself completely. She accused him of emptying himself completely, wrongly, and it cost her life. She was required to empty herself completely of life, to bring a new life to the world. Anyway, that's what Rabbi Shapiro heard when he was 11 years old. Rabbi Shoshan, I'm going to take a break at this point. We've spoken for more than 45 minutes. I'd like to hear if there's some questions. Let me summarize in 1 minute, please, and then I'll invite any questions. I'm very happy to answer if I can. But the summary is this. Torah requires a cultivation of depth. Not only Torah, to be any kind of meaningful human being, you need to cultivate it. The Mishnah says, I never found anything better for myself than silence. I sat at the feet of the wise and I learned silence. I learned from this. Here's a beautiful incident. Rav Moshe Shapiro once was giving us a shir, and on the table in front of him was a voice-activated recorder. You people probably don't remember, but years ago there used to be things called cassettes. Cassettes, here's one. This is called a cassette. You probably don't know what it is, but there used to be things like that. And we used to go to shirim and have one of those things on the table that recorded the shir. And this fellow had a voice-activated recorder. You know what it is? When you speak, it records. And when you stop speaking, it saves space, it cuts, and it activates itself again. So Moshe looked at this thing clicking on the desk, and he said to the student, what is this? And he said, Rabbi, this is a fantastic invention. This cuts out all the silences when you in your lecture. And Moshe said to him, the silences are part of the lecture. Okay. Anyway, your silence should convey much more than your words, much more than your words. Silence, COVID, Corona, you're locked in with yourself. You always need to be locked in with yourself. You need to become comfortable with the idea that you've cultivated much more that you can never say. The only person who can ever share that is somebody so close to you that they know what you mean anyway. Rabbi Shoshan, I've done my best with some clumsy words to express to your American compatriots what it means to cultivate a little bit of silence and the challenge of using this time to develop a silent inner depth, an appreciation of Torah and your own humanity that goes beyond words. I'm very happy to take some questions if people would like to do that.
Okay, thank you so much, Rabbi. There's a, hopefully everyone can see me. I don't know if the system always works the right way. We hope that it does, but we have enabled the chat. And so there is a question that came in right away that reads, how does cultivating silence translate during davening?
That's a good question. And the answer is this. I'm not advocating silence with no expression. Please don't misunderstand me. I'm advocating communication that has depth behind the communication. The answer to your question is when you daven and you speak to Hashem, there must be meaning behind the words. We conventionally call this kavanah. For every word you say, there's got to be meaning behind it. You're talking about the disaster in davening, to spit out words with no meaning at all. And therefore, we're not talking about being a person who never expresses himself. We're talking about a person who's richly expressed in the world. But the thing is, for every word you express, there must be much more behind the word that's inexpressible. We're not talking about a lack of communication. We're talking about a communication that has a depth that is an unspeakable, unspoken depth behind every word of communication. To cultivate that, one needs an exercise of meditation and silence to get to that point, to be comfortable with silence. Yes, any other questions?
Okay, there are some people who are raising their hands. We're actually trying to direct you into the typing chat, which you can enable at the bottom of your screen where it says chat, and send us the questions. A second question that came in reads, please explain the link between COVID-19 and the word kavod. There must be a link.
There's no link at all. Next question.
Okay, please share your personal observations as an MD and as a Rav regarding the virus. Also, do you believe, as many have expressed or denied, that this is a birth pang indicating that Mashiach is imminent?
You know, this is not directly on our subject. I'm giving a talk in 1 hour's time. That's 9 p.m. UK time on Corona, what we know about it at the moment. I've recorded previous talks on the virus and on the efforts that should be made that are appropriate and the medical aspects. I'm giving a summary in 1 hour's time on what we know about Corona and COVID, technically, scientifically, what trajectory we might see taking place at the moment. So people are very welcome to log in. That's completely free. You just go to the JLE, Jewish Learning Exchange in London, and just connect to that. You're welcome. If that's problematic for you, you're welcome to email me through the JLE and I'll send you a recording. But I cannot do justice to a summary of COVID at the moment. And spiritually, whether this is a messianic element, we have no way of knowing. Hashem does not communicate with us with prophetic clarity. We know that everything that happens is leading us there. How immediately and how distant, we do not know. Try asking a question that I can answer.
Okay. Was Adam's knowledge of Chava pre-existing or was it developed? If it was developed, how was it developed?
You know, Rosh Hashanah, that question is so deep. I don't even understand it. Let me say this. Adam's knowledge of Chava was, let's refer to Kabbalah, if I may. They were fused as one being before they were brought to the world. The Gemara says fused at the back. Fused at the back. No back, only two fronts. They were torn apart. That's a Kabbalistic procedure called the Nasira, and brought into the world as two people to find each other and fuse again. So all marriage connection is a reconnection of an original oneness. So it was original and developed. The point of marriage is to reach higher than you were in the free connection that you were given before. This will take us into a long discussion of marriage. But that is the concept. The concept, there's a oneness that is original. There's a loss and a tearing apart. The Gemara says the reason you long to marry because you're looking for the part of yourself that you lost. And then there's a development in a oneness that is far higher than before, because this one is done through your own effort. But to do justice to that, we need a separate discussion. Okay. Any questions that relate to what we spoke about now, I'll be happy to answer if I can.
Here's one I think is more related to the topic. Is there a deeper idea of the Isser of speaking Lashon Hara, which is beyond just speaking derogatorily about your fellow based on this idea? Can one suggest that perhaps it's expressing your fellow by trivializing them using words?
That's a very good question. No, I think there's something a little different. The essence of Lashon Hara is using speech for harm. Let me remind you that Lashon Hara is when you say something derogatory or negative about somebody that's true. That's remarkable. We're not talking about telling lies. What the unique feature of Lashon Hara is when you say something harmful, painful, denigrating, derogatory about someone, which is true, which means you're using genuine speech. Let me explain this for a moment. When you lie, you are not speaking. You're pretending to speak. What is speech? Taking something genuine in the mind and expressing it. Lies are from the lips out. Notice we say, Elokai netzor lashoni meira usfatai midaber mima. Hashem, save my tongue from speaking Lashon Hara and my lips from speaking lies. The tongue's an inner organ. It speaks the truth. Lashon Hara is when you speak true and do harm. The lips are an outer organ. They speak falsehood. It's only from the lips out. So here's the secret. When you speak Lashon Hara, you are using the ultimate human expression, the ability to connect worlds, the unspoken spiritual world and the expressed material world, which is what speaking is. And you're using that ultimate human faculty for harm. There's no greater insult to the human form. And that's the spiritual damage. You know, when the spies spoke about Israel, why were they punished for Lashon Hara? There's no Lashon Hara against a land. You can only transgress Lashon Hara speaking about a person. Why were they punished? They were using speech for harm. That's the essence of that. And therefore, when you speak badly about somebody, okay, apart from all the technical and social issues, you are using the defining characteristic of the human being to do damage in the world. That's exactly what the original serpent did. Brought havoc to the world and all human suffering by distortion of speech.
Okay, there are three questions that are different one from the other, but I'll ask them together because they seem a little bit related. In order to be a better, more silent person, what might I do differently, tangibly tomorrow? And another person asks, how do we cope with silence in our lives when it makes one panic? And a third one asks, what method, if any, do you use to meditate? Do you use a mantra, a spiritual sound, or some other method?
Okay, what you can do tomorrow to cultivate silence is silence before speaking. Silence before speaking. Count to 10 if you can take that or stand it before you express it. Not when your wife asks you something that she needs. Then you don't take time thinking, right? That's a way to destroy your marriage. But in other circumstances where you can, you count to 10 very cautiously, very calmly, think about it very carefully and weigh each word. That you can do tomorrow. There's an extreme technique you can use. We call it Tainus Diburim. Go through a few hours, a day or two, one day, without speaking at all. Without speaking at all. That action of control will color the rest of your life. So the practical exercise you can do is not speaking for a while or weighing every word carefully. Rabbi Miller said that the first time he met Rav Dessler, he was a 10-year-old child. His father took him to Rav Dessler to see if Rav Dessler would teach him. He said they walked into the room and his father said, "Good morning," to Rav Dessler. Dessler put his head in his hands and thought and thought and thought for many, many minutes. And then he said, "Good morning." Then he asked him another question and he thought and thought. He thought, what is this man doing? Rav Dessler was going through a period in his life when he was working on perfection of every word. It took many minutes to answer every question. He was disciplining himself in that way. You can do a little bit of that and you can cultivate it. Second question, if you panic when you are silent, it's too early for you to practice that. You need a therapist. You need some external help. You need to work on your own inner issues until finally you can cultivate little by little a silence. And final question for now, and I think we'll have to call it here, Rosh Hashanah, if you don't mind, is the question of meditation. Meditation takes different forms. There are a couple of Jewish books about it. If a mantra works, it works. But you can trivialize the mantra as well, focusing on a part of Hashem's name or some other mantra. The essential faculty of silence is learning to know without words, simply learning to think about a thing without an inner conversation. Most of us are having a cheap talk show running in our minds all the time. Rosh Hashanah, I hate to tell you this. Most people are talking to themselves and they're not even listening. They're talking to themselves and they're already thinking what they're going to answer before they even heard what they said, right? Worse even than the cheapest talk show on the radio. No, a little silence to know a thing as it is, a beautiful experience, to savor it and understand what it is, not because you can communicate it or put it in words of what you're going to tell your friend about it. That's the meditation. It's a grasp of what it means. What does it mean to be a Jew? What does it mean to receive Torah first? If you can put that into words, you killed it. If you can put into words what that means for you, the total experience, you killed it. You reduced it to, I'll leave you with this thought. we are commanded to count 50 days, very clearly. Tisperu chamishim yom, count 50 days. We count 49. Excuse me, we have a commandment to count 50 days. Tisperu chamishim yom, count 50 days. We count 49. Why don't we get up on the 50th night, make Kiddush, and count the 50th day? We count the 50th day by remaining silent. Torah is beyond count. It's not another number. Torah is when the 49 steps are put together. When you play the 7 notes, the music happens. You can't play the music, you play the notes. The music happens, it transcends the notes. And therefore, when you go through the 49 days of the Sphira, you don't count the 50th, what an insult. It's one more day. Torah is one more number. Torah is the music that emerges from the 49. We count the 50th day by not counting it, by allowing it to express itself in silence. Thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity to all your communities, Rabbi Shoshan, and I hope to see you again.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. I would like to share what I was thinking while the Rav was speaking and playing that the talk show in my mind, which was first to thank our sponsors, Mervyn and Janine Levine here in Scottsdale, as well as the family of Yafa Sarah Bas Yehuda Cohen for sponsoring the entire event. I also want to remind you that next week at 1 hour earlier at 10 a.m. Pacific and 1 p.m. Eastern and so on, we have the opportunity to hear from Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson on the topic of the world has changed, have we? And lastly, apologies for some of the technical problems. We, of course, will try to work them out. We had thought that we had 1,000 spots here in the Zoom room. It ends up that due to some technical billing element, even though we do have 1,000, it wasn't registered with this class. So we had only 100, and our apologies for those, as well as some problems on the WeLearnTogether.org side of things. But we will do our very best, and we're confident that by next week, we'll be all together again in Yirtz Hashem, growing and using our time to serve Hashem together. And again, thank you. Can't thank you enough, Rabbi Tats. It means so much to me personally and to all of us to have had the opportunity to hear the music that came out from your words.
Let me thank you and your team. I see you had a team behind you, and I very much appreciate the technical help. Thank you.
Okay. Kol Tuv, everyone. Make it a wonderful day. Be Mekadosh Neshamayim. We look forward to being together.